Hi everyone and welcome back to Locked In, the platform where we at Cuboid get to talk about stuff. The purpose of this video series is to explore various topics that will help educate, inform and bring awareness and hopefully create that light bulb moment for our viewers to consider self-storage as a great investment choice. We're now at the stage in the Locked In series where we've validated why self-storage is a great industry, and now we're starting to move into the what's involved topics. In last month's episode, we heard for the growth journey of the You Store It portfolio, some great insights into the steps that were taken and the learnings gained along the way. In today's episode, we're going to be exploring one of the most important topics when it comes to building a successful self-storage business, the location. We'll delve into the considerations that feed into the site selection, from the initial research through to location strategy, planning and pre-fit out considerations. I'm joined by my co-host, Simon Forrester, CEO of the UK Self-Storage Association, and Richard Davies, an experienced former self-storage operator and now CEO of Storage Partners, an organisation that helps investors create highly profitable self-storage portfolios. So Richard, before we get into the detail, I know we've known each other for some while, for the sake of our viewers, would you like to give yourself a bit of a background on who you are, where you've come from and where you are today?
Well, it's been a long journey in property. Over the last 30 years, I sort of started to cut my teeth in central London residential development. And then halfway through my career, I kind of went into commercial. I bought hotels and in particular service office businesses. That's where I kind of really got to know sort of opco propcos.
Okay.
But, you know, for a large part of my career, I've been sort of used to fly around Europe finding deals. And it very much meant, you know, finding, okay, how do you find the right location? It's that old adage of real estate, location.
That's it, yeah.
And it really very much now applies to self-storage. I love that aspect of the business. When it was a transition for me into self-storage in 2018. I was very focused on a serviced office, opco propco. When we went in and the first site we acquired was a container site, and then latterly in 2023 and 24 we built out a small platform called Look Storage, which is an internal self-storage model. And that's where it really became apparent to me that understanding the right metrics of demand and supply were even more important in self-storage than anything I'd ever seen.
Yeah, fantastic.
So Richard, in the run-up to the episode, you said that self-storage is fundamentally a marketing problem and that location analysis is the first and most important marketing question any business should ever ask itself. Can you explain the link between site selection, customer demand, and supply dynamics?
Okay, yeah. So unlike other kind of businesses, self-storage, it became very obvious to me from the research that self-storage customers want to store their things nearby, which basically means that it's a very geospatial sensitive business. So in other words, it really basically comes down to what is in that particular location, what is the relative demand versus supply, which is a marketing question fundamentally. But one of the amazing things about self-storage, I think, is because it's so data rich, it's so numeric, I'm a bit of a numbers geek. I really love the ability to really understand sort of data and use that data, that demand and supply data, to sort of really ensure that the locations that we were picking were going to work.
It seems to me that we've moved from a bit sort of finger in the air, this looks right, to much more of a science-based application. Would you support that in terms of location choice? People are starting to really drill down into the data. They're looking at the planning proposals for where new estates are going to be built. They're looking at the sort of the macro scale rather than just kind of going, well, we've got some farmland, let's put some containers on it.
Yeah, I think that my sense is, to use a sort of marketing term, that self-storage is crossing the chasm. And it's going from a time where literally you could build a facility anywhere and you're gonna make money, and that's great. And now we're kind of going into an era, I think, like most industries, where you have to try a bit harder. And I think that's a great sign. Interesting enough, a lot of people, you get feedback then is, well, have I missed the boat? Which is standard for any industry that's crossing the chasm. And that's definitely not the case. No. There's so much more, but it does mean people are going to have to kind of, focus more and think about what the investments they're making. It's a commercial property investment. It's, hundreds of thousands to sort of millions, depending upon what type of facility. And, people need to take that real professional approach. And the data is there, it's just trying to understand, how to apply that kind of data. And I think that that gives us, people who do their homework will, in the setup phase, the sort of finding phase, will reap the benefits for decades when they're actually trading, because it's going to be easier for them to find the right customers if their facility is close to where those customers want their storage to be. So yeah, it's definitely now, I think we've reached a point in this industry where it rewards people that do their homework.
So one of the questions that was asked of me recently by someone who's looking to enter the market was around a potential location, and they were saying, does it matter whether I've got sort of street visibility or whether I'm sort of tucked away on an industrial estate? How much does that matter, given that we're in a world now where people are finding locations through Google? Do you have to have that sort of curbside presence still?
I think you've answered the question. Yeah. In the old days, people always looking for sort of, we have a tendency as human beings to follow sort of the crowd. The industry was born by kind of, street presence, but that comes at a cost. You want a site with high visibility, it's going to cost you a lot. If you're renting, it's going to be a big price tag. If you're buying, it's going to be a big price tag. And the question is, are you better off putting that money into marketing costs? And I think in most cases it's the second. If you get really good at marketing, with sort of Google as an easy one, because that's where most people, I think, will find online. Yeah. And then it doesn't really matter so much. It definitely helps. And given a choice between taking a site that's got great kind of traffic presence, and one which doesn't, given the same price, I'd go for the one which has got visibility, no problem. But it's not. Life is not that simple.
But we're in that sort of environment of the sort of the golf sales sign. Someone's got a shop, but it's down a side street, so they put somebody on the main street with a big sign saying we're just down here. Yeah. I'm guessing that's still a viable option for people to be a little bit more tucked away, but as long as people can find them fairly easily, that's just as important.
So fundamentally, yes, I'm glad you said that, because I think the industry is going to have to adapt to a market where everyone's been so focused on kind of Google and PPC, or AdWords, but it's getting more expensive. Much more expensive. More competition means that you're going to have a proper local area marketing approach, sort of sales promotions, those sorts of things, right? Kind of guerrilla type marketing, right? Those, and it's the people that can understand and adapt to that and just don't kind of just rely upon kind of people clicking. They've got to have to adapt from a marketing perspective.
Well, in a previous episode, we had examples of some fantastic examples from people who'd embedded themselves in their local community, and that word of mouth had got them way more customers. In fact, one example was they were putting zero into Google and PPC. It was all focused on the local population, and they were pretty much at capacity. So, horses for courses. I think you've just got to measure that. I know we're going to look at that in the next episode, and we'll be talking to experts on marketing and PPC exactly. Then. So we'll pick up on that.
Well, obviously, you ask an expert on PPC, they'll tell you PPC works and it's just like and tinkering. But I think you've got to think bigger than that. You've got to be more creative.
It's a mix, isn't it? You've got to have that mix, and there is no substitute for people going self-storage in the pub. Self-storage. Oh, there's a place just down the road. That's how we interact. That's how we share knowledge. It's that trust. Again, that trust is trusting them with your precious stuff, with your business assets. You having somebody saying to you, "Well, I put my stuff in there." That's worth 1,000 Google searches. In my humble opinion, anyway. We with our service office business, we were mostly. If I had to divide the sort of the challenges between operations and marketing, we were 80% about operations, because we had lots of people who wanted phone calls answering, and post and yoga on the roof and all this, sort of creating a community. And it was a lot more complicated to run, whereas self-storage should be, especially kind of if you use technology, should be a lot easier to run. We had a very simple marketing system where basically, we would be present on Google, but everyone would come and see the facilities, or the offices, and figure out whether they wanted to be here or down the road. So it was very much about being like, wowing them when they walk through the door. And self-storage is more commoditized than that. And the churn rate on self-storage, nearly 100% a year. That's huge. That's enormous. So you've got to get really good at attracting kind of customers. And to feed that back into the location, ultimately, if you put the location in the wrong place with too much kind of competition, you're gonna have a big fight on your hands, and it's going to affect your pricing. So I think actually, I would go as far to say that location analysis is probably the biggest determinator of kind of profitability.
Excellent.
Because your marketing team are going to have a fight on their hands if you've put the location, pick the wrong location.
So yeah, I mean we've approached this from different perspectives, but essentially it's before you break ground, make sure it's the right ground. It's from day one, finding the right location and using a bit of science, but rather than just intuition to source that.
You can do a lot. I think you can do a lot by just going out and sort of being observant. But there's a lot of really foggy thinking about this, and I'm seeing it in so many different industries as well. Where I was in a small industrial estate near Staines the other day, and I noticed there was a Wickes, and then right next to Wickes there was a sort of Howdens, and then there was about 4 or 5 of them, all the main ones like sort of City Plumbing and all these guys. So I find this really interesting. So, and I'll talk to anyone, and I actually sort of went into each counter and I asked the employees there, how come you guys are all in a row selling the same, bits, effectively, bags of screws and whatever? And then they obviously had asked that same question, and they just said, well, that's how business works.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know. I don't think it is actually. I think I'd much prefer to open up a sort of tool shop or whatever, where none of these guys are. I'd be finding places kind of, and I think that very much applies to self-storage. And I certainly would, if you want to make it really, really simple, stay away from anywhere that Big Yellow and Shurgard have got kind of, because it doesn't take long to work out that they're in a price war with one another, and you're just going to lose that one.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. You do find like Screwfix and Toolstation, they're all in the same industrial estates and things. Maybe it's a mentality thing where people think that's where I go to get the bits that I need. If I can't get it there, I'll get it there. And I don't know, maybe.
I'd probably say it's more to do with planning and zoning and those sorts of those industrial estates. But actually, they all said, Wick's opened, and then basically, we always do that. And it's like, I don't know. I think there's that old adage in corporate worlds that basically no one gets fired by choosing IBM. No one gets fired because, well, look, Wicks were there, so it's kind of it seems low risk, but actually. For the independent operators, I think they can do an awful lot better than just thinking like the herd.
So with location, obviously location is extremely important. You know, another thing that's important when looking for a location, it all hand in hand, is facility size. And you know, how does somebody determine what's going to be their ideal facility size, coupled with the location of where they? Because that's the next question after location. It's how big does a facility need to be? Yeah.
So I've got a sort of mindset that likes to use kind of put things in boxes and find examples. And when we're building a strategy for Look, I kind of worked it through and said, okay, where I think, and this goes hand in hand with the question around location and staying away from Big Yellows and stuff. And I use the Tesco's model to sort of try and define our strategy. And Tesco's, like all these supermarkets, basically, they all started in the 80s, 90s, whatever, and they were all supermarkets, and they all had, people on checkouts, and they all had similar sort of sizes and whatever. And you'd find a sort of Asda and a Sainsbury's and a Tesco kind of, and then they sort of were going for market share. So I don't know which one came first, but I know sort of Tesco's went into Tesco's Expresses, for example, the small one, the sort of convenience stores, basically. And they're much smaller than the superstores. And then they started all competing on these big kind of Tesco's Extras, right? The huge kind of out of town. So their destination kind of locations, much, much bigger. And there's only certain places you can put Tesco's Extras and because of from a planning perspective. And then they came up with a kind of middle ground for sort of secondary locations called Tesco's Metros. So Tesco's have, in size order, Expresses, Metros, Superstores, and Extras. And if you relate that fundamentally to the sort of types of facilities you get in self-storage, you've got the kind of the Big Yellows and the sort of, I know Karen, who was on last month, they built a 150,000 square foot facility in Ireland. It's amazing, kind of, I think that's the largest one in Europe or whatever. Yeah. So that's that is an extra, Tesco's Extra, right? And I would say sort of Tesco's Extras and sort of would start in at about 80,000 net lettable, something like that. The superstores, Tesco's superstores would start at about 40 to 45,000 net lettable, go up to 80. And sort of Expresses would be up to about 20. So Metros fit in that 20 to 40 sort of bracket. And they're kind of interesting because they can be really quite efficient, those sort of facilities. You can make them, you can still make them very automated, sort of remotely operated. And more importantly, from a location point of view, you can go for locations that keeps you away from the Big Yellows, and because they're not interested in that, because at the moment they're after market share and they're after the bigger and better. So I like the lower end sort of size, and then you've got like little micro ones, I guess, which you could put below the expresses. And I know a lot of people think about like these tiny little sub 10,000 square foot net lettable. And I'd love to.
Is it more just city centre retail conversion? I mean, we've seen it in Austria, like, yeah, and the Nordics. They've basically taken over a shop and put a load of lockers and small storage in for people to go and put their bikes in and collect their shopping from Amazon. So is that the sort of market share you're talking about now?
Again, it's like if you're living in the centre, you've got a bike and you can't, you haven't got enough room in your apartment, or your ski equipment or whatever. We've all got like loads of stuff, right? Kind of, you want it nearby. You don't want to be, you want to be able to walk to your bike and access your stuff. There's a real premium for that. And my concern with the micro stuff, I don't know, you've probably seen some that work, but I haven't yet seen a model that I think has got the right metrics, mainly because the gross, one really important thing is always sort of net gross to net ratios. And there's always an element of kind of, you're going to have some sort of lobby space, and that really eats into these kind of things. And sort of, so I don't know, but yeah, I think utilization of existing kind of buildings that probably haven't got a very high use value, basements in below, for example, below shops.
Yeah.
I think are really interesting opportunities. And from what I've seen, there's the one thing that we've got in this industry is an abundance of entrepreneurial spirit, mindset, thinking, and I think that's incredible. Yeah. So yeah, all the way through the spectrum. The place I like is that metro model, because it does allow you to go and get scale, but in those secondary kind of locations.
Not everyone can afford the big approach, so people that are looking for that sort of Tesco's Express kind of size, how do they approach
Tesco's Express size or the metro size?
Yeah, the small end of the scale, the sort of 10 to 20,000 square foot kind of.
They're going to be they're going to be conversions of existing buildings, and yeah, so then you're going to have to be quite careful, I think, on this. This gets into sort of more planning constraints, more concern about kind of the building and whether the building is has got longevity. I mean, if you fit a building out with all the internal kind of stuff, all the stuff that you guys do, and then it needs a new roof or whatever kind of, so those sorts of considerations need. So those are the things when you're looking at conversions, I think need to be thought through, but they're all insurmountable. You just got to do your homework.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's all about planning and preparation and everything else. But obviously, I know you're quite heavily supportive of data and analysing of data. Maybe you can explain how tools like GIS can help aid the selecting a location and kind of bringing it to a reality. How do tools like that work?
So a GIS is a geographic information system.
Okay.
Which is a sort of fancy way of effectively saying, is there sufficient demand versus supply in that particular location? And it uses data, different sort of, you've got abundance of different quantitative and qualitative data to determine the sort of demand, and then you kind of apply the same process for supply. So in a simplest form, we use a GIS for look, and really I kind of applied that, created that initial GIS, and it was a spreadsheet-based system by reading every single book I could find on self-storage that were all American, and listening to most of the American podcasts, and really trying to, and in America as well, you can actually sort of employ someone to give you a site sort of feasibility model. They charge about $15,000 or whatever. And to be honest with you, I just reverse engineered their models, and it was relatively straightforward. One of the people on the Storage Partners team is a guy called David Charles. David he's retired now. The only work that he does is with Storage Partners. And he ran the PropCo function of B&Q and rolled out 10 million square foot of B&Qs. He was someone said he carpet bombed the UK with B&Qs.
Orange, yeah.
And he was the one who had to go and find the sites that worked, get the planning, do the whole construction, build the facility, and then hand it over to the OpCo team.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, and that's what he does on our team as well. He kind of helps negotiate contracts and whatever. When he was running B&Q, he had a big property team, and they used something called the gravity model.
Okay.
And a gravity model was effectively a GIS. But if you look at McDonald's, any company. Any big corporate that, and I'm sure B&Q and these guys kind of run GISs, they will have a modelling system which will basically determine what the relative demand and supply is in that location.
Yeah.
So we just developed our own GIS and we've improved it, and then we gave it a name somewhere along the line. And we're basically, and our GIS is called Gertie.
Okay.
Gertie, and we're actually up to version 3.5 for Gertie now.
Okay.
And we're working on Gertie 4. And what Gertie does, it takes out all the guesswork of sort of location analysis and pulls in all this data and really gives you a really good sort of it doesn't replace the sort of the individual kind of knowledge, and I would always encourage people to learn about these things and go out and use their eyes and ask questions and go, why is Wix next to kind of Howden's? Why, all these guys, why is Screwfix just being, and I think, but having a data system, the reason why B&Q and McDonald's or whoever, use these systems is because it's a tool like anything else.
Yeah. Does Gertie assess competition and things like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does all that. So
Yeah, it does the whole
that's
thing.
interesting.
Yeah.
So at what point does the
And pricing and stuff. And actually, Gertie 4 we're working on, it actually becomes a marketing tool as well.
Wow. Fantastic.
So not only does it basically tell you whether that's a great location or not, once you've actually built it and then running it, it'll basically tell you how to target the best customers with the highest lifetime value. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So what point does the competition aspect become a red flag to someone who's looking for a site that, because there are self-storage places that have set up right next door to each other. Like you go to London, you have got Big Yellow and Access and all on the same street and right next door. So at what point does that competition become a red flag to someone to say, this isn't the right place to set up? Even though the location might be by a road, it might be a fantastic location on paper, but due to the competition in the area and the demand, what point does somebody say, no, this isn't right, I need to look for somewhere else?
So I'll give you an example. I looked at a potential facility site for a fund the other day, and they actually sort of said to us, "Oh, we've decided to buy. We've agreed to buy this kind of site." And I looked at it, and it was like, okay. And I said, "Well, if you want me to take a look at it, I will do that." And it took me I spent only about an hour on it, and then got him on a Teams call and said, "Look, okay. For a start, the building is not a great building for a self-storage because the gross to net ratios and everything, and your parking and blah, 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 okay? But actually, if we said it, to put that one side for a second, you're within 400 meters of a Big Yellow and Shurgard, and I can't remember which one. Shurgard, I think, published their prices, so I got published prices from them. Big Yellow didn't, so you have to fill in a form, and you get a phone call 2 seconds later, and they're on it, right? And they gave me a price, and I said, Shurgard is sort of advertising it for a lot less than that kind of, I'll just go for them. And they're, oh, well, we'll price match it and stuff. So cut a long story short, this was actually in Ealing.
Okay.
Not the cheapest place to buy real estate, right? Not the most expensive, but by far not the cheapest. And it worked out the price per square foot that Big Yellow and Shurgard were on were close to £20 per square foot.
Right, okay, wow.
Now, what's the average in the UK? 29.
28, 29,
So
yeah.
what's that tell you?
That's great. And in London as well. In London, you expect to be a lot higher anyway.
Yep. But you see it anywhere you go where you see those guys kind of near each other, check on the pricing. So yeah, that's a red flag. And that's a relatively straight, easy thing to do, right?
Yeah.
It just takes a bit of kind of common sense, like, and if people want, but it's such a big investment. Right? Once you bought the building or leased it for a long time, potentially with personal guarantees, and then spent a lot of money on fitting it out, you're in, right? So yeah, the more diligence you can do, and if people need help, there's people out there. There's help. Cuboid, you guys are brilliant at helping people. When we were building Look, you guys were fantastic at understanding that. But and there's resources out there. The association is incredible as well. What we try to do is just sort of give people, a little bit of a sense check. Give you that skills and access to talent like David, and to be quite frank with you, for the first few sites with Look, I was negotiating. I bought a load of real estate, before, and negotiated deals. And then I realised actually there's someone who could do it a lot better than me, and he did.
Yeah.
And for the amount we paid him, I thought, right, okay, everyone needs access to a David, and that's what we're doing. So there is resource there, but get it right.
Yeah.
Basically. Yeah, because it's a big investment and it's a big cost if you get it wrong.
Population dynamics are often cited as a key driver. Can you walk us through what you're actually looking at? Is it density? Is it demographics? Growth trends? Household income? What's GIS mapping doing to help you visualize that and interrogate that data in a way that's, I guess, you couldn't get from a spreadsheet?
So you've got all of that, okay, and there's real depth. There's quantitative and qualitative data, on both the demand and the supply side. And there's only so much that your GIS will give you on a sort of data systems, and they will then inform you, and you'll then need to go and actually go and assess some of the supply sort of straight on. So I would, on any location, I would go and mystery shop every single thing. But coming back to the demographics, is the demographics trying to understand the kind of movements, the types of, ideally you want to sort of understand a bit more about the types of people that in that location, the types of businesses, bearing in mind the highest lifetime values of any customers are going to be businesses. And then also understanding highest lifetime values for residential customers, and trying to understand the sort of, there is no destination when it comes to data. It really is. There's so much out there now. It's really understanding how to convert that data into insights and decisions. That's ultimately, and the GIS and Gertie is there ultimately to give you a really, really good steer, and so you can look at the data. But at some point you kind of got to get in your car and actually go and back that up. But with Look, we were in about 100 site to 1 ratio. In other words, I got offered 100 sites, to get 1 site. So the GIS comes in at some point, really to sort of help whittle that down, because you can't go running around looking at every single kind of site You just won't have. It allows you to filter more options, and improve decisions, and sort of also know what to look for. So on the supply side, for example, that's something where I would go and mystery shop, and one thing I would always do, I would always want to. I'd always ask if I could use their bathroom, and partly because I'm sort of 56 and that's where I'm in life. But also it was really useful because a great way of working out how well a business is run is to see how well their toilet is looked after, and if it's dirty and whatever, it kind of tells you that business isn't being particularly well run. It just and I try and understand as well. You get engaged. You start talking to the people who work for the business, and a number of times I came away going, wow, that's a really well run business. I bet their marketing is really good as well, right? And you kind of go, and again, a GIS can't help you with that. But it can make sure that you're sort of, it can really very much help that whole process of location analysis.
So it's that combination of head and heart, I guess. It's the hard data analysis from a GIS plus the sense of I get a vibe about either a town or a location or a street to go, this is the right spot for me.
Yeah. Exactly, and I always had the rule that even when I was in residential, I used to go and look at 100 properties before I bought one, and just because you get it's an education. You have to get in your car and go out and talk to people, and sort of hustle a little bit. And I think most of the self-storage operators kind of get that, but they just need to do a bit more. I am surprised by number of self-storage operators that haven't actually gone to look at many competition. And you can learn from them as well. You go into some of them, you go, wow, I never thought about that, right?
It's a very friendly sector too. I mean, most people will actually sit down with you over a cup of tea and have a chat and explain how they got where they got to. I think not everybody. Caveat is you may if you say
up next door,
I'm looking to open across the street from you.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a line there.
But certainly as an industry, it's a very welcoming sector, and it's a sector that the barriers are fairly low to having conversations with people. So you can learn, you can do that research relatively easily if you're willing to put the hours into doing it.
Yeah, I mean, you know why everyone's really friendly, because everyone's making money. Yeah.
Let's see what it's like in 20 years' time.
Yeah.
But at the moment,
crossing the chasm. Yeah, it's a great time to get in, but you just have to. You actually now can't just open anywhere. You actually have to kind of have to work a bit harder to these things, and that's great. It's a great place. Because it also means funding and everything like that kind of opens up. And I think it's a great time to be getting involved.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
Superb. So someone's found a location, they've done all their due diligence, they know that's where they want to be. The next hurdle, planning. So that's very important when it comes to the location. What kind of things do people need to be aware of in the early days with regards to planning before they really commit to going for a site? Is there any pitfalls that they need to be aware of that could crop up later on down the line?
Okay, so this is where we'd start talking about the area of the business that I think has got the highest risk. I think the two biggest risks in self-storage are margin risk, which is basically opening up in the wrong place, and then you're not going to make as much money. And then you've got development risk.
Yeah.
And a lot of people forget that this is commercial real estate. And the parts of the two parts really of development is the planning and sort of the regulatory approvals, let's say, for what you want to do, and then there's that construction side. And this is the sort of thing where it could be a catastrophic kind of failure if you get those two wrong. And so it's very, very important. And ultimately, risk, I think it's Warren Buffett who said risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. So I think, people that have got a lot of experience in commercial real estate or, planning or whatever, it's relatively straightforward. They'll know what the process is. They can go on the planning register. They can talk to the local local planning department. But either way, unless you really understand those really well, you need a good planning consultant to make sure you're going to get the use. And that's relatively straightforward. And then you can do pre-apps and all these sorts of things and blend that into the deal. I wouldn't be recommending anyone take planning risk. If they're buying or renting, it doesn't really matter, because that would be a case of, that would be a serious problem.
Yeah. Should someone be talking to the local authority or the planning office before they commit to a site? Is it something
100%.
they need to have a conversation with them first to make sure it's something that's viable? And
I mean, if it's come to an agent or whatever, you can simply ask what the planning register is. If it's B8, you're good, fundamentally, but there's can be nuances. And then one of the nuances is there's sui generis, which is like a planning term for we don't kind of know, maybe one or the other, right? And ultimately it comes down to, and I find planning law really kind of hard work, and the whole planning process, and it's very different from one authority to another. So this is one area that you really need some support with. I mean, we can help with that as a part of our kind of location process. But ultimately engage with a local planning advisor early on. If you like the site and you kind of think it's like, before you spend too much money and go too far down the road, do that. And then, you might find you're getting into conditional deals, for example, right? But taking planning risk, unless you've got a really great secondary kind of use for that location.
Yeah, true.
And a lot of people don't really understand it. So they don't understand, again, risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. So it doesn't cost a lot in that development phase to get it right. You just need to recognize that it's not your thing. You don't have enough experience, and just kind of spend a bit of money to get it right.
In our last podcast, Karen from Ireland was saying that the two key areas are that as you said, the planning and the development of the site. So she said, put time and money into expertise that are going to support you on both the planning side and the design of that site to maximise the likelihood of you getting the planning through.
Yeah, exactly.
So just wanted to pick up on that point. And as an adjunct to that, you talked about the planning is one of the major risks, and the other one is that development of the site. Once you've identified and potentially you've secured a site, what's the typical remedial or pre-fit out phases that you're going to go through? What are you going to have to do to that before you even think about getting the cuboid guys in to fit it out?
So so development, planning, and effectively construction conversions. And if you bring it down to these two things, what does the customer want? They want it to be safe and they want it to be dry, which was actually the name of the container storage business that I started.
Safe and dry. Does what it says on the tin.
It was a Ronsil kind of thing.
Yeah, nice.
But the other thing, we couldn't trademark it, so we didn't use that going forward. But anyway, safe and dry, that's what customers want.
Yeah.
Emphasis on the dry, and ultimately is the building dry, so is the roof. Fundamentally it comes down to roofs and floors. Especially if you're putting mezz in there, load bearing, the floor's got to be able to take it. And so it's looking at those sorts of things. Safe, where you're going to put the perimeter fencing, What are what we call sort of either remedial or enabling works, which enable the effectively the kind of the change in use from a warehouse to self-storage. So those enabling costs are kind of very important. And if you don't understand construction and you don't understand buildings, and you've got very little experience in, roofs and flooring and all these different things, again, get someone. We have the sort of director that we have on our team. He does incredibly complicated projects. £100 million plus construction with mixed use, and this is relatively straightforward. But it really is very, very important that you get those sort of regulatory kind of things, and that then crosses over into things like fire, making sure it's kind of, when you construct it, it's actually it's going to get kind of fire approval, and that can, depending upon the type of construction of the building and the availability of kind of fire access and things like that, that can have a real effect on your gross to net ratios. So yes, again, get advice. And actually that construction process as well, and this is a thing that we're very, very keen on, and I think it's one area that a lot of people with a lot of operators in self-storage don't take seriously enough, is that construction element is the HSE, sort of health and safety.
Yeah.
Sort of the construction and design management, the CDM processes. If you don't follow that right, you could be in real trouble, especially if someone gets hurt. And again, Big Yellows and the Shurgards and all these guys, they do that. They follow proper CDM process. They've got all that. But a lot of I'm concerned that a lot of the more entrepreneurial, it'll be all right, kind of, okay. And so I think the development aspect of it, you need to really take seriously, because that could be a catastrophic kind of investment failure.
Okay, Richard. So in terms of all the aspects of what somebody coming into this market needs to think about, where does location fit?
So we use a model. You've probably guessed by now, I kind of like to put things in kind of boxes, logical sort of assessments. We've created this assessment process with storage partners, and it's called the 6F framework. It's the first two are about foundations and funding, and it's called 6F because they all begin with F. So foundations would be the sort of getting the corporate governance, getting the structure, setting up a company, maybe getting trademarks, getting the right branding, which has a big impact as well. Getting all those things right, which might be and entrepreneurs never want to hear about corporate governance. But getting the financial structure right is going to make a huge difference, because it goes hand in hand with funding. Because one thing storage partners want to do is bring funding, the right sort of capital allocation. So in other words, we will have funders which will want to invest in self-storage operators, but they'll want to invest in self-storage operators that've got the right governance structures in place. And they're doing they have board meetings, and having that sort of structure, these foundations, you're going to find it a lot easier to get funding. Once you've got your strategy and your money, then you need to go and that's where finding comes in. It's about finding the right location and then the fitting it out. Those two come next. And they're kind of transactional, really. Finding the right site and fitting it out is going to take you 6 months, 12 months, maybe. And I know the big one over in Dublin, that Karen built, I think their process of finding and fitting out was like 3 years. It was the planning process. It was complicated, but that's 150,000 square foot. Anyway, however long it takes, those two it's transactional. Okay, it's very, very important to get it kind of right. The last two F's is fill up and farming, which sounds an unusual term, but fundamentally those come down to marketing and operations. So how you acquire customers and self-storage and those things, the marketing and running the facilities, well, they are transactional, but it basically comes down to discipline every day, using tools, systems, basically go and attract customers and to run those facilities and optimize profitability, which is what it's all about. And if you can get all these 6 F's kind of all aligned, then basically that's where you're going to optimize. That's how you optimize IRR, which is internal rate of return, which is effectively what this is really all about, because that's what they talk about at the board at Big Yellow and Safe Store. It's about investment efficiencies. So location is incredibly important, because if you find the wrong location and you spend a load of money fitting it out, you're going to really struggle. But we've created a scorecard system that actually helps people with this. So if they come to our website, storagepartners.co.uk, you can take the scorecard. It's free, and you ask you 6 questions in each of the 6 F's. So 36 questions in all. Mm-hmm. And that will then give you a score, effectively tell you the areas that you kind of need to work on and you need some support on. And the idea is that it starts those conversations, because we can't all be good at everything. I'm not great at construction. I've never really enjoyed building, although I really love the process of the design of the facilities.
Yes,
and,
yeah.
One of our, I remember, I think we had like 18 iterations or something.
Like
I was
a
pain in
yeah.
Yeah. Because, and I love that, the fact that we kind of moved the lift kind of, 10 feet that way, and we suddenly got like, another 400 square foot net lettable, and then you multiply that by £30 per square foot, and then add that to the exit multiple, and you kind of go, wow, that was amazing. The actual construction, not so much. That's a different style. So we all come to self-storage with skills and sort of things and Storage Partners is all about helping people sort of fill the gaps.
Yeah, cool.
In their expertise. Really, and so that's the framework. Location, incredibly important, because it comes back to this, that self-storage fundamentally is a marketing problem. With 100% churn rate, that's where it is, and by the way, you can get that churn rate down if you get the marketing kind of right, but it's still people, self-storage sort of customers, they can be quite sort of transitional, basically. They're doing up a house or whatever. You can't get away from that churn, so you're always going to be losing customers, and that's like, unless you're really good at replacing that, you're not going to optimize. And knowing where that location is, and whether that location is going to make it easier for you. It's not going to make it like a walkover. And of course, you could find that more competition comes yes, along. Yeah, true. Right? But it's important to recognise these that there are multiple things we've got to get right if we're going to kind of maximise our investment returns, which is ultimately what it's all about.
So you've got to get all of those 6 F's right to maximise to, if you'll forgive me, to get to the 7th F, which is selling up and effing off to a desert island.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, very good.
Okay, but I think that's a neat segue into the end of the interview.
Exactly. Right then, time to wrap things up. Join us next time where we'll be joined by some marketing experts who specialise in our industry, and we'll be discussing how you can stand out from the crowd and share some marketing essentials that will help drive your business success. So Richard, thank you very much for joining us. Simon, thank you for being my co-host again. And that's all for now, folks. So let's sign off and we'll catch you next time on Locked In.